The Color Purple wasn't just a period drama, it was a cultural earthquake, a film that tackled race, gender, and survival when Hollywood preferred safe stories. Today we're uncovering 20 strange facts about this movie that most people never knew, hidden battles, dangerous emotional risks, and shocking twists behind the camera. And there's a bonus at the end, one moment that nearly took a legendary star off the film forever. So speed up with me, because the list starts now. Number 1. Steven Spielberg almost said no. He was the biggest name in Hollywood, but this project almost slipped through his fingers. Steven Spielberg had built his career on adventure and spectacle, on sharks and spaceships, not on intimate stories about systemic racism. When Warner Brothers pushed the project toward him, he actually hesitated, worried he lacked the lived experience to do the story justice. Studio executives pressured him anyway, knowing his name alone could guarantee a box office hit. He finally agreed, but only on one condition: that he would lean heavily on Alice Walker's original novel and trust the instincts of his cast. Years later, Spielberg admitted he simply wasn't brave enough yet, that he didn't have the maturity to fully capture what the story demanded. That doubt shadowed him through production, even as the film went on to earn 11 Oscar nominations. Here's the twist almost nobody remembers. Several black filmmakers were considered for the job first, and the studio's decision to hand it to Spielberg instead sparked controversy before a single scene was ever shot. Number 2. Oprah fought for the role. Before she was a household name, Oprah Winfrey was just a local talk show host in Chicago, and one book completely consumed her. She read Alice Walker's novel and couldn't put it down, carrying it everywhere, reading passages aloud to anyone who would listen. When she heard a film adaptation was happening, she begged for an audition, but casting directors brushed her off entirely. So she tracked down Spielberg's office herself and left message after message until someone finally listened. When she got her shot, she blew everyone in the room away with raw, unpolished vulnerability that no trained actress could fake. Spielberg reportedly looked at her and said simply, "You are Sophia." What almost nobody knew is that right after filming wrapped, Oprah feared the role might actually destroy her budding television career instead of helping it. Instead, it launched her into global stardom, proof that sometimes obsession is exactly what a role requires. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3. Alice Walker discovered Whoopi. She was a complete unknown when this film changed everything. Whoopi Goldberg was performing raw, one-woman monologues about race, gender, and survival in a small San Francisco theater when fate stepped in. Alice Walker herself happened to attend one of those shows, and what she saw floored her completely. Walker went straight to Spielberg and told him she had found her lead. Goldberg's audition reportedly moved Spielberg to tears, a monologue so intense it left the room speechless. The role transformed her career overnight, but the emotional cost was steep. She later described having to empty herself out daily just to embody decades of silence and abuse. Other established names were considered for the part, including respected actresses with far more experience, but none of them carried the same raw, unguarded authenticity Goldberg brought to every single frame. Number 4. Quincy Jones saved the film. This movie might never have existed without one music legend's stubbornness. Quincy Jones read The Color Purple in 1982 and immediately saw its cinematic potential at a time when studio executives dismissed the story as too risky for mainstream audiences. Jones personally convinced Spielberg to take the director's chair, using his own industry weight to keep the project from being shelved entirely. But that decision brought backlash of its own. Critics accused Jones of selling out by letting a white director lead a deeply black story. He pushed back publicly, insisting his only priority was getting the story told at all, no matter the criticism that followed. On top of producing, Jones also composed the film's score, blending African rhythms with sweeping orchestration that still gives the movie its emotional pulse today. Without his fight behind the scenes, Alice Walker's story might never have reached the screen at all. Number 5. The set was emotionally brutal. Filming this movie was nothing close to glamorous. Scenes involving abuse, rape, and domestic violence were rehearsed again and again until cast members genuinely broke down between takes. Oprah admitted she carried Sophia's rage home with her at night, unable to fully shake it off, while Goldberg often went silent between scenes just to protect Celie's fragile vulnerability. Danny Glover, playing the abusive husband, said he felt completely alienated on set, struggling under the weight of embodying such a hated figure day after day. Spielberg tried blasting music between takes to lighten the mood, but the heaviness never fully lifted. These weren't just performances, they were emotional excavations that left real scars. That documented pain is exactly why the film still hits audiences like a gut punch decades later. Number 6. An unscripted moment of tenderness. One of the most unforgettable scenes in the entire film was never actually written on the page. Picture Celie shaving her abuser, humming softly, tenderness colliding directly with years of buried trauma. That scene wasn't fully scripted at all. Goldberg improvised much of it on the spot, humming and speaking lines that existed nowhere in the screenplay. Spielberg recognized the authenticity happening in front of him and simply let the camera keep rolling. Editors later fought hard to preserve every second of it, calling it the true breath of the film. The improvisation worked so convincingly that test audiences assumed it came straight from Alice Walker's novel. Goldberg later revealed she drew the moment from childhood memories of watching her grandmother braid hair, turning private memory into cinematic history. It remains a rare, delicate reprieve inside a story, otherwise soaked in pain. Number 7. The film sparked protests. This movie wasn't universally celebrated, not even close. Before it even premiered, several black male leaders publicly denounced the film, claiming it unfairly demonized black men by portraying them only as abusers and oppressors. Organizations held heated debates, with some groups actively calling for boycotts of the film entirely. At one New York screening, protesters picketed outside the theater, holding signs accusing the film of lying about their community. Spielberg faced accusations of racial insensitivity for directing a deeply black story as a white filmmaker, while other voices argued the film powerfully amplified women's experiences instead. The controversy nearly overshadowed the film's entire release. But strangely, the protests ended up fueling curiosity, drawing audiences who wanted to see exactly what the uproar was about. The backlash didn't kill the film, it accidentally turned it into one of the most debated movies of the entire decade. Number 8. Shot in order on purpose. Most films get shot wildly out of sequence to save money, but Spielberg deliberately broke that rule here. He filmed many of Celie's key scenes in chronological order, allowing her arc from silence to empowerment to unfold naturally on screen. Goldberg began the shoot withdrawn, often whispering her lines, and by the time the crew reached the explosive dinner table confrontation, she had genuinely stepped into her power as a performer. That choice wasn't cheap, it stretched the production schedule and drove costs upward, but Spielberg believed the payoff was worth every extra dollar. Watching a real transformation unfold in real time gave the performance an authenticity that simply can't be faked or replicated in post-production. It was a financial gamble that shaped one of the most convincing character arcs of the entire decade. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. Danny Glover paid a price. Playing the villain in this film cost Danny Glover far more than he expected. He delivered one of the most chilling performances of his career, embodying cruelty and generational trauma so convincingly that it followed him off-screen entirely. After the film's release, strangers spat at him in public, screamed insults, and even threatened him for what his character had done. Glover later admitted he tried explaining to people that he wasn't actually Mr., but nobody wanted to hear it. The hostility was intense enough to shadow his very next projects for years afterward. He said he also carried private guilt, wondering whether audiences would ever separate the actor from the role he had played. What few people knew is that Glover actually softened some of the character's harshest lines himself, believing the uncut script was simply too cruel to perform as written. Number 10. Oprah's body for Sophia. Oprah physically transformed her body for this role, and the toll lasted long after filming ended. Spielberg wanted Sophia to appear physically imposing, a woman who could believably stand toe-to-toe with her abusive husband. Oprah gained weight quickly, eating around the clock to build the fuller frame the character carried with visible pride. After filming wrapped, though, she crashed into depression when that weight didn't come off as easily as it went on. She later confessed publicly that Sophia's body lingered with her long after the cameras stopped, becoming one of the catalysts for her lifelong struggle with weight. That transformation gave Sophia her unforgettable, immovable presence on screen, but it also left Oprah wrestling privately with identity and body image for years, an imprint that the role never fully let go of. Number 11. The ending almost changed. Alice Walker's novel ends quietly, with Celie finding peace surrounded by family. But the screenplay almost took a completely different direction. Studio executives initially pushed to shift the ending's focus toward the romance between Celie and Shug, arguing audiences needed a clear love story payoff to walk away satisfied. Spielberg resisted that pressure, insisting the real arc of the story was Celie finding her own voice, not finding a partner. Goldberg backed him up completely, later saying her character didn't need to be rescued by love. She rescued herself. In the end, the filmmakers kept Walker's original spirit intact, closing on Celie's personal empowerment rather than a conventional romance. Had the studio won that argument, the entire film might have ended as a simple love story instead of the radical declaration of selfhood it became. Number 12. Secret rituals on set to survive the crushing emotional weight of this production. The cast quietly built their own coping rituals. Oprah has revealed that she, Goldberg, and co-star Margaret Avery often gathered privately in dressing rooms to pray, meditate, or simply cry together between scenes. They called it their own healing circle, a private space away from the cameras entirely. Danny Glover, despite playing the film's villain, sometimes joined them, quietly apologizing for the on-screen brutality he had to perform. These moments of solidarity never made it into the press at the time, but they sustained the cast through genuinely grueling emotional demands. Spielberg respected the ritual without inserting himself into it, giving the actors the space they clearly needed. Decades later, cast members still describe each other as family, proof that even the darkest productions can create real, lasting bonds. Number 13. The scene they almost cut the film's emotional climax very nearly didn't survive the editing room. Celie sprinting across a field to embrace her long-lost sister remains one of the most unforgettable images in the entire movie. But in early edits, Spielberg actually considered trimming the scene down, worried it felt too sentimental after such a harrowing story. Cast members reportedly begged him to keep it intact. Oprah later said that reunion was the payoff for all of our pain throughout the film. Spielberg relented and restored the scene in full. During filming, the actors cried genuine tears. Nobody needed to fake that joy on camera. Crew members reportedly applauded after several takes. Without the cast's insistence, the film might have closed on a colder, more restrained note instead of the radiant catharsis audiences remember today. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations. And tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 14. Alice Walker's tears. When Alice Walker attended the very first screening of the finished film, she wept openly in her seat. But her tears weren't only about joy. She later admitted the film felt both beautiful and somehow incomplete to her. Spielberg had captured the emotion of her novel, but she felt certain aspects, especially Celie's romantic relationship with Shug, had been noticeably downplayed on screen. Walker pushed him to preserve more of that intimacy, but he resisted, worried mainstream 1980s audiences weren't ready for it. Critics later echoed her concerns publicly, accusing the film of quietly erasing queer identity from the story. Still, Walker praised Goldberg's performance as transcendent and gave her blessing for the project to move forward. What few people knew is that she briefly considered pulling her support from the film entirely before ultimately compromising, a tension that scholars still debate to this day. Number 15. 11 nominations. 0 wins. This became one of the most talked about Oscar snubs in Hollywood history. The film scored 11 nominations, including Best Picture and multiple acting categories, yet walked away from the ceremony completely empty-handed. The industry backlash afterward was brutal. Many argued Hollywood simply wasn't ready to reward a story, about black women filtered through a white director's lens. Others suggested the Academy was quietly punishing Spielberg for stepping outside his usual blockbuster territory. Oprah later described sitting in the audience, stunned, as category after category slipped away without her name being called. The public outrage that followed only gave the film more cultural weight over time. What audiences didn't realize was how deeply that snub actually hurt the cast, many of whom felt Hollywood was dismissing their genuinely groundbreaking work. Decades later, fans still call it one of the Academy's most shameful oversights. Number 16. Margaret Avery became Shug. Margaret Avery didn't just play her character, she seemed to fully become her, even when the cameras weren't rolling at all. To prepare, she reportedly wore Shug's flowing gowns around her own house, spoke in her sultry cadence, and immersed herself completely in blues music, but none of it felt glamorous behind the scenes. Avery admitted that embodying a woman who both empowered and quietly destroyed herself was emotionally exhausting to sustain day after day. She often wept after filming her love scenes with Goldberg, terrified those moments would be cut or mocked once the film was released. Her dedication paid off critically. Reviewers praised her performance as magnetic and fearless. Still, she felt overlooked when the Academy Awards passed her by entirely. She later called the role both her gift and her heartbreak, having given the character far more depth than a simple stereotype ever required. Number 17. Banned in some countries. While this film was controversial inside the United States, it was outright censored in several countries abroad. South Africa, still under apartheid in 1985, banned the film entirely for its portrayal of black resilience and open defiance. In parts of the Middle East, censors physically cut scenes depicting intimacy between two of the female leads, labeling them immoral. Even in parts of Europe, television broadcasts frequently removed sequences showing domestic violence before airing them. Spielberg later reflected that he expected controversy, but not outright erasure of entire scenes. Ironically, those bans only fueled underground demand for the film. Pirated tapes reportedly circulated globally, spreading the story into places where governments actively tried to silence it. In some corners of the world, simply watching this movie became a quiet act of rebellion in itself. Number 18. Hidden tension on set. Not everyone on this production bonded easily behind the scenes. Some veteran actors reportedly resented Oprah's inexperience, while newcomers privately felt intimidated by the seasoned professionals surrounding them. Danny Glover admitted he often isolated himself deliberately, partly to stay locked into character as the despised husband he was portraying. Spielberg tried fostering unity by hosting group dinners, but small cliques still formed anyway, despite his efforts. Strangely, when the cameras started rolling, those real fractures translated directly into powerful on-screen realism. Celi's isolation felt sharper, Sophia's defiance rang louder, and Mr.'s menace became even more believable to audiences. What people didn't realize is that some of that on-screen chemistry wasn't entirely scripted at all. It came from genuine tension simmering beneath the surface, tension that ultimately became another raw texture woven into the finished film. Number 19. Spielberg held back on purpose. Some of the film's darkest moments were deliberately toned down during production. Spielberg originally planned more graphic depictions of the husband's abuse, but he grew worried about re-traumatizing his actors, especially Goldberg, who was brand new to film and already carrying enormous emotional weight. So he altered camera angles instead, letting suggestion replace outright brutality on screen. Danny Glover later said he felt relieved by that decision, insisting they didn't need to show everything because the cruelty was already sitting there in the silences. Some critics have since accused Spielberg of softening the story, while others argue that Restraint made the film even more devastating to watch. What audiences didn't know is that these changes weren't only about avoiding censorship, they were about actively protecting a cast already on the edge of emotional collapse. Number 20. A legacy that still divides. When this film premiered, critical reviews came back sharply polarized. Some critics hailed it as an instant masterpiece, while others accused Spielberg of sentimentalizing Black suffering for a mainstream audience. One prominent critic passionately defended it as the best film of the year, while a major newspaper dismissed it as fundamentally misguided. That divide never really faded. For decades afterward, scholars have debated whether the film represents a triumph or a betrayal of its source material. Regular audiences, though, embraced it wholeheartedly. Lines from the film entered popular culture, and new generations kept discovering Saley's resilience for themselves. Letters reportedly poured into Goldberg and Oprah for years, thanking them for representing voices that had rarely been shown on screen before. The critical split remains unresolved, but the film's staying power proves exactly how much it still matters. Almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Bonus fact: the role Oprah almost lost. Here's the twist almost nobody talks about. During early test screenings, some studio executives felt Oprah's performance as Sophia was too raw, too loud for mainstream audiences, and they actually pushed Spielberg to recast her or cut her role down significantly. Spielberg resisted the pressure, but he warned Oprah privately that the studio was circling her part. Distraught, she checked herself into a weight loss camp, convinced she had somehow ruined her one shot at stardom. Weeks later, Spielberg called her personally and told her flatly that they couldn't take Sophia away from her. The role stayed intact, and Oprah went on to earn an Oscar nomination for her very first film role ever. What almost nobody knew is just how razor-thin her entire Hollywood future hung in that single moment. Without Spielberg's protection, the icon we know today might never have existed at all. And those were 20 strange facts about The Color Purple. This film mattered more than a simple award count could ever measure. It launched Oprah and Whoopi into superstardom. It scarred Danny Glover with hatred he never deserved, and it sparked debates that still rage nearly 40 years later. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and comment which fact surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list of strange facts. See you in the next video.